Onstage, Onstage with Jim and Tom. 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 Tom and Jim.
Tonight we welcome the punk rock band Resilience to the stage of the Phoenix Theater. This band hails from Santa Rosa, California, and has an 18-year history. With lyrical content that touches on a wide variety of social problems, they represent an attitude of self-empowerment in a world of negativity. Tonight, we'll explore their views, we'll explore their history, and later, they'll play some music. Please welcome to the program, Resilience.
Resilience.
Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey there.
Hey there. A lot has happened in the 18 years that you have been a band. And Tom and I were talking about his 30-plus year history of doing punk down here. Mm-hmm. And this show tonight and the political climate that we're in right now reminded him of a story from 1991 with the band DRI.
Oh, DRI.
Take it away, Tom Gaffey.
Oh, all right. Well, because I was going over your lyrics from the early days, and I remember those days, and it was all Sharps and Skins, and it was.
Can we tell everybody what Sharps and Skins are?
Well, I'd love to hear your version of that. Actually,
Let's come back to it later. But go ahead. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So we had back in it had to be 91 or 92. I had my truck for. It was the worst truck I ever owned. It was just a ridiculous thing.
I've got one of those too.
Yeah, my God, it was. It was a Mazda B2200, and. Right from the gate, I'd had this thing 3 weeks. We had DRI play here, and it was the night that there was a crew up in Santa Rosa that were going to have an anti-Nazi rally in Walnut Park, and a crew of Nazis from mostly Sonoma, as I'd heard it, had heard that rally was going to go on, so they decided they'd come and break up the rally.
Of course.
The anti-Nazi kids heard that was going to happen, so they decided to bring their rally right to the front of the Phoenix because they knew we had security. And while I had darn near a sold-out DRI show going on here, and it was great. The pit was going off, the stage dives were going off, the band was hot. It was a great show, full to the rafters. Outside, we had goose-stepping Nazis and screaming and shouting anti-Nazis, and a crew of police officers that I'd never seen before. I don't even know how they knew about this, in full riot gear. So it was one of my first riots that I'd ever seen. Actually,
and you had never seen in your entire life police in Petaluma wearing the masks.
Yeah, wearing
the
the helmets and the masks and everything. They were decked out for it and ready to go. And this thing went on while the show was going on, and miraculously, it all ended kind of all at the same time. I found myself at the end of the night out sweeping the sidewalk. The Nazis had gone. The anti-Nazis had gone. The crowd had left, and DRI had just driven past down Washington Street in their box truck, and I waved at them, and they honked at me, and off they go. And some kid comes walking back from the parking lot in back and says, "Dude, man, DRI just backed their truck into your truck,
Oh, no. It's an unexpected twist ending. We thought there was going to be a bloody face-off. Tom Gaffey's car gets destroyed.
It was a beater anyways, though, right? Yeah.
So that story came up in your mind when we were talking about this.
Because I was reading the old Resilience lyrics, and you guys were right on the forefront of that battle, as a matter of fact. You've always been very strong anti-Nazi, anti-hate.
We've always had a clear stance against that. It's right in the songs, it's right in the lyrics. And all our friends growing up, before Scott was actually in the band, he got into an altercation. You'll have to explain that in a second, but actually we had if you want to, we had an anti-racist action. That's what we used to call it. I mean, there's so many different varieties.
Oh, that's like a thing that's like all around the place. But
Rock Against Racism. We had a show with like Pressure Point, the guys from Sacramento, and just a lot of different style bands, that were kind of in solidarity against just that kind of just bullshit, just stupid, just violence for the sake of it. In that case, racially based violence, which is still just dumb violence. But we had that show, and actually,
you remember what year that was?
Oh man,
that was probably
early in the band.
That was like 2001, I think.
Okay, so you were formed in 1999, just for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, 1999, and we started playing right away.
Tell us about that thing that happened, though.
Oh yeah, basically he got into some altercation, and we actually didn't know Scott really personally directly at the time, and so we heard that some different people were getting hurt, and just stuff was going on in the community, and so we're like, man, we need to say something about it. We need to let these people know that we're against it, and that there's a large base of people, the majority of all of us, obviously, because really real punk rockers and real skinheads and things like that, and it's such a wide variety culture-wise. There's all these different misfit kids that come. they're just trying to have something to do. They're just trying to, have a place they can go where they're not being judged.
Yeah.
So bringing in judgment, especially such a just simple-minded, ridiculous judgment, it just doesn't make any sense. So you have to often, all throughout history, you've had to, every once in a while, you just kind of have to clean house. You have to clean your neighborhood, clean your area, your city. And you have to, a lot of times, just playing some shows like that so they know they're not welcome. Like, hey, these are not KKK rallies we're having. We're trying to have a say. We're trying to play music, And ours in particular, it's I would say progressive. You know what I mean? It's extra open-minded. We're going out of our way to be like, hey, everybody's welcome. So, and a lot of those bands literally had to fight a lot of those people, like guys in Pressure Point. We've had to literally get into altercations with them and fight them, things like that in our towns, just because they start coming around, they start trying to pick on younger kids, bully people, they try to recruit people, especially younger kids especially. Yeah. And then next thing you know, you can have 20 or 50 of these guys if you don't do something about it.
The other part of it too is it's just like throughout history, you're saying like, oh, you got to clean house and things like that. Just like, I think what I would kind of add to that myself, just because I personally find like the cleaning house thing, that can be kind of problematic language too. But like the thing about punk rock is kind of like where people, it's like it's almost throughout its history been like a place where people can go to like be free to be who they are and like express themselves how they are, like you were saying, without judgments and things like that. And the minute you bring in like a movement that is like anti-freedom, is meant to like suppress like certain types of people, certain groups of people, whether it's like the color of your skin or your gender identity or your sexual orientation, whatever it is, like that sort of thing is like where that thing gets fought, right? Like that's why that stuff isn't really welcome in punk rock usually.
Yeah.
Well, especially when we're trying to make a community, we all have a family unit, so to speak, especially around here. Like we know everyone in the scene, and you have these people come in and they just want to dominate just for the aspect of the power of it all. Mm-hmm. And they might not even necessarily be, white power or whatever. They're just assholes.
Yeah.
They're kind of angry guys.
Sometimes there's crews that come out of different spots, like way out in East Bay. At the Phoenix, I remember that there was a crazy hardcore show that I just came to personally, like a bunch of people we knew were at. And some crew just came out of way out of East Bay just for the heck of it, just to be violent. And that wasn't even fueled by anything particular. But I mean, they came out and just beat up people for no reason. Yeah. Mostly outside.
Throughout the years, we've had had our histories with that.
So he and I were talking before the show, and I was saying, it's funny, before this year, I think like the general populace, the non-hateful general populace, was really surprised that there were still people who subscribed to the Nazi ideology. And Tom looked at me and he was like, what do you mean, surprised?
Yeah, that stuff's never gone away.
I said, you're right, because in your venue here, the Phoenix being a teen center, you encounter a lot of different types of people.
We still do.
And
that stuff's never really gone away.
But a lot of people have been shielded from it. And a lot of folks have sort of like hidden and obscured their views or colored it in different ways. Right. And now you see a year where it's a little more in vogue to be a little more hateful.
Well, they're rebranding it.
They are.
Yeah. A lot of that mentality is also, it's kept alive in institutions, like prison and stuff.
That's true.
Yeah.
A lot of it too is like, kind of what you're saying. It's almost like a in a weird way, kind of a branding thing, right? Too, like because I see a lot of it as, and especially like in the current political climate, like people like the Trump campaign and the administration and everything too, there's playing on a lot of these like old fears in a lot of people and using media as a means of like stoking that and like kind of like turning those embers or from kindling into huge fires, right?
Well, it's essentially what it is. It's fear and ignorance. People are afraid of change, which there does need to be changes in this country, and it's been a long time coming. But especially like with white males who have dominated, they're so afraid that like, oh, whites are going to be a minority and then we're going to be slaves and blah, blah, blah. And it's like...
No, it's not true at all.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I used to think that it was a dinosaur thing. And I, like myself, I'm 62.
Totally agree with what you're about to say.
This crew is going to get old and die off. But son of a gun, I'm seeing it back in the colleges in a big way nowadays. And I'm seeing more of the youth actually willing to identify with that.
Yeah.
And it's scary. It must be a cyclical thing. It just keeps coming back.
Yeah.
What's the thing? It's like something that's obviously passed down like in families.
Well, there's that, but I mean, it's also...
they break that cycle. Like some kid is like, no, fuck you. Like, I'm going to do, what I think is right. your views are wrong.
Yeah. I think a lot of it too is like there's a difference between like being for or against something and like doing the work to actually like propel that, right? Like that you can be like somebody who like is like, oh no, I'm not a racist or whatever, but are you gonna like kind of go out of your way to stop, to like kind of put a curb on racism or like really inspect and look at racism, look at sexism, look at speciesism, look at whatever it might be, and really investigate these things and like kind of go after their root causes and like figure out how you can kind of work with people to also push their views beyond just the simple like rejection, like like verbal rejection of something into a broader cultural institution.
This
really.
band, and why this is relevant, this has been a band that's had a set of opinions, has had an ideology for 18 years. That sets you apart from a lot of bands, and you are vocal about it. And it seems like in your songs, you do try to fight that fight, and you try to stay. And when you say clean house, I can't look into your heart and see what that means, but my read of it was sometimes you just got to stand up and you got to say, this is something we don't believe in, and if you believe in it, we don't want you here. And I don't think there's any problem with that. I don't think it's inappropriate to say this is a place that does not respect hate, and if you're racist or if you're homophobic or if you're transphobic, etc., we don't want you here.
Right.
Well, it kind of is like a series of steps. It's like if you try to reason with people, we try to talk to people first.
Yeah.
And as a last resort, if like they bring the physicality, then we'll stand up against it. We don't normally go out of our way to do that, No.
Also, there's another thing that a lot of people don't talk about in general in the whole world, and that's standing by while things are happening to people in general in the world. Where you're going to just walk by while somebody's getting raped in an alleyway. I don't really have that capacity, and I'm not really even trying to be that kind of person. I'll go in there and it'll become a problem, and my day will get bad all of a sudden, but I'll go in there and do what I think's right because someone's getting hurt. That's usually where we draw the line. We don't tell people what to believe. We voice our own opinions because you literally have come to a show where we're playing. You can just leave. We're only in one part of the world at a time. You can just go. Like, we didn't ask you to come there. So if you don't like what we're saying, that's fine. And you don't even have to agree with it, But when people start hurting each other, people start punching each other, I mean, it's ridiculous. It doesn't really matter what it's for, you know what I mean?
Well, it ruins a pit.
It's not democratic at all. And technically, I mean, as silly as it might sound, everybody being able to have a different opinion and being able to say what they want, that's great. That's just freedom.
That's a tough one for people. People have a tough time with that, because freedom of speech allows a lot of different speech you may not agree with. And what you see, and at least I see, in the younger activists, who I agree with. I largely agree with a lot of their ideals and what they're saying. There is sometimes this push to say, well, what you're saying is not good. You can't say that.
Right.
And it's a sticky area, and we could talk for hours about it. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, you seem to be an absolutist in terms of it.
Dialogue is changing a lot because, I guess like political correctness has changed a lot because things have come up in the last 20 years that it's like, no, you are offending people just for your own joy or something,
Yeah.
And it's I remember like, in the 80s, it's like people threw the term fag around, and it's like now that's like a super red flag. And it's like, we shouldn't be saying that.
No.
People getting upset about political correctness and things like that. Like the thing that I usually notice in those instances when people are like, oh, you're trying to be the PC police and whatever it is it's usually somebody who has not been marginalized by anything that would be like kind of a red flag, right? Yeah. Like if you're the type of person who is thinking like, blah, 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 the PC police thing and so on and so forth, like I think it's kind of on you to stop and listen and ask yourself like why you feel the need to be able to bandy around terms that are offensive to other people. Like why is it like, what skin is it off of your back really? I think is kind of like the thing like a lot of people need to ask themselves in that regard personally. But
well, they don't really know the disrespect that's being said. They just don't realize it, and hopefully you can talk to people and they'll get it, but not always.
This band has been alive during such an incredible period of change. You know, you formed prior to the George W. Bush administration, and
Just prior.
Probably you would probably feel like you formed right at the beginning of that one, which was maybe
we're
for
turn
some
of the century.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's-
1900s.
It's just
1900s punk
crazy
rock.
to watch how much the world has changed since this entity has been around.
Yeah.
Do you, before
It's
we
changed drastically.
Yeah, I mean,
We're not living in the same world.
Do you feel that way?
I know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would if I think that's just a fact. I mean, just even the things we're talking about right now. The world was socially speaking for most people simpler. It was a bit simpler. It was a little more black and white.
It felt very monochromatic. I agree
It
with
felt a lot more like, hey, you know, there's corruption and we're against this corruption. You know what I mean? It was a lot more simple. Obviously, there were smaller, you know, factions of different kinds of problems. There's always many variations, you know, in society, but it did seem a lot simpler.
Well, the voices you're talking about either didn't have the platform or
Right.
the solidarity.
Exactly.
And if they did speak up, then they would just be drowned out.
Well, we didn't have like that. We didn't. I mean, this sounds kind of cheesy to say. Everybody always says this, but it's like, you know, the rise of like social media on the internet, right? Like that voice is propelled to everybody. Now, instead of having the immediate circle of people that you would talk to, or maybe like a magazine, you know, like you might have like some indie zine that you would post things to or whatever. Now you can have your voice heard by millions of people at once, right? So like that has changed a lot of stuff. The access and immediate access to information has changed a lot of things.
And the flip side to that coin is all the misinformation that's going around too.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things I love about having a band like you guys on is you look at the early lyrics, which Tom has on his phone right here, and you really weren't wrong on a lot of stuff. You know, we live in a world that is one way, and we're going to like push and fight against the negativity and all that. I mean, if you look at like all of the stuff that has manifested and gotten worse in the 18 years you've been a band, you were rallying against that in your albums. And that's remarkable.
You know what's really weird is these guys came at a time, you guys formed at the end of the 90s, the end of the last century. And if you'd asked me in 95 if I felt the world was changing for the better, I did in those days. But that's
And then George W. Bush came.
Yeah, I mean,
There's been a lot of
for lack
ups and
a better-
downs.
There's been a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
But my world was smaller than I thought in those days. I was seeing everything from the floor of the Phoenix Theater.
Yeah.
And it was looking pretty good. The ideas and the love and the stuff people were talking about and
Yeah.
the direction it was going felt like we had it nailed.
Yeah.
And
The potential is always
Yeah.
there, and it's always been there. And you're also seeing a community of people that are trying to do something productive, something creative. That's a big difference.
At its
it's not
best, yeah.
destructive usually, you know what I mean?
I mean, there's certainly like a downside to a lot of punk, especially like street punk and stuff. But I mean, yeah, like at its best, punk has always kind of been about like self-empowerment, like creating things of value and like giving people voices and things like that.
You mentioned two terms at the beginning of your DRI story.
Sharps and skins. You know what? And I'm always, and that's the problem. I'm at a point now where I get confused myself.
Sure.
It's actually a big history lesson
Okay.
that I could explain, but it will take like a half hour. But in
Would
general,
you like to take a stab at it?
Can somebody?
I can
conceal
try to. I'll interject a little bit, and then we
Yeah.
can all these guys. But basically, the original younger brothers and sisters of generations of kids that were around during the mod movement in the '60s, those kids got introduced by like specifically the guy that owns Island Records. I don't know his name right now. He wanted to get some of those bands that he had literally seen in Jamaica, you know, mento music. It was like not even reggae yet. It wasn't ska. And a lot of people get those all confused, but he basically wanted to get that music out to the rest of the world. And England was cheaper plane tickets. So the young working class kids in England got a chance to get to see this cultural thing. And it was cheap, you know, so they could go. You're talking basically mostly about white working class, middle class and lower class, you know, kids. And they would go down the street and they would see ska bands, all black musicians from Jamaica, poor kids, and they got into it and they could relate to it. And so those kids started calling themselves, they were basically, the hippie thing was going on. When they buzzed their heads down, it was to say, hey, we're not hippies. They didn't agree with some of the stuff that the hippie thing was about. They were trying to have their own youth movement. And so when they buzzed their hair, it didn't mean, this word skin has nothing to do with it. It's a haircut. They could be called suede heads. They could have been called anything. And they had boots on because they're kids from like Sheffield. You know, they're kids that work in coal mines. They're kids that work in glass industry where they can't, you know, their toes will get cut off. Yeah. On the docks, they're wearing, you know, they didn't even have blue jeans. Those came from America. So the original skinheads, they're basically, they listen to ska. You know, they're listening to music from, you know, black people. So it's like being racist and even being that.
To kind of like interject, I mean, really the sharp thing is specifically skinheads against racial prejudice.
Yeah. And it's an American invention.
Like just to kind of like really quickly clarify that, because I know I think that's kind of what you're trying to get at. But and then, you know, the skin thing is like, that's a whole big other.
It's a big cultural thing. It's just like, it's just
a very vague term. It could relate to, it could be all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating because I think the majority of the population here, skinhead, they have one idea. So,
because newspaper will take something that happens. If somebody gets stabbed somewhere in New York City and some guy, like he was saying, like Johnny was saying about the prisons and jails, people will go in there and they'll mimic cultural things that they don't understand, and they'll adopt a term that they don't even have the right to adopt. And they'll go back out into the world and they'll call themselves, oh, I'm a skinhead. And I'm like, oh, what's your favorite reggae band? And they're like, what? Fuck that, you know, white power. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you're like, I don't understand right now, you know, and then they'll go stab somebody, and super big across the newspaper, it's all skinhead kills kills old lady. And then that's all like, anybody remembers.
That was like in the 80s is when they
that's
really
a specific
tried to take over the whole scene and claim it as theirs.
Yeah. And in England, they tried to do a right-wing, super hardcore racist thing.
Mm-hmm. National Front.
National Front. And they tried to, these are young, working class, healthy, you know, people who are going to be the next generation. They're going to be adults. So they tried to adopt them and try to pull them into their political endeavors. They tried to use them. That's basically, and so that whole thing got split into two factions. And there's a third faction. There's a lot of people that call themselves traditional skins. They don't even want to talk about it. If you start even talking to them about politics, they get real upset. They're like, don't talk to me about that. You know what I mean? They're just trying to, it's just a style for them. You know, they're working class.
Yeah, it's kind of a culture.
They wear jeans, they wear boots. You know, the one thing they don't have in common is they don't take shit from people usually. They're individuals, do you know what I mean? And that's why those people liked that whole culture. That's why people try to use that. You know, anytime you want to get the working class behind your political movement, that's a great idea, you know what I mean? So that's basically, that's all that really is.
Muscle would come from.
There you go. There's your street soldiers, you know? And so it's been abused and confused, just like punk rock, right? Like we all definitely smoke crack right before this show because we're punk rockers, you know? Right. I don't want to sound too conspiracy theory, too creepy or whatever, but I feel like a lot of people. I'm going to make sure not to. But I feel like a lot of people benefit off of individuals like us not being able to have a clear standpoint of what they believe in. You know, like if you ask me what I believe in, it's not going to be real complicated and blurry. I'm a fan of freedom. I don't have to agree with what you say or what you believe in at all. As long as you let me have my freedom, then we're good. Yeah. You know, as soon as you try to attack me, you know, then I'm going to defend myself.
So from your vantage point, it's a problem to go punch a Nazi then if the Nazi isn't throwing punches.
We've never attacked anybody ever. We've been attacked. Yeah, we've been attacked. And we will still, right before we even get attacked, we'll try to buy a guy a beer and just leave. You know what I mean? Whereas some people, there's even people a little further over, I don't know exactly what you'd call them, where they would say that us even, you know, letting someone be that way is a problem. They want to go knock on everybody's door. The problem with that is now you're a fascist. Yeah. You've gone all the way. People have to, you know what I mean? You're not going
to. Really, what have you changed with that person?
That is a very popular standpoint.
And these
nowadays.
People don't want to change. Yeah. You know, we're like, hey, we believe in freedom. I had a guy look me right in the eyes in Detroit, and he said, fuck freedom, right to my face. And I'm looking at this guy. These guys are big, serious dudes. And the whole thing turned into a huge fight. But we tried as hard as we could. And we just said, hey, listen, we don't agree. We don't have to agree. This is your town. We already had our say. We played our show. We're going to leave. We didn't come here to tell you how to live your life. You're at our show. But that was their local bar.
It's real complicated.
And they just wanted to fight. Yeah. They were not having, they wouldn't even let us out of the place.
Do you believe
violence.
It was 100% political, or could it have been they just wanted to fight?
I think it's kind of a mix.
Yeah. It's a mix. Yeah. These guys were just like, they were meatheads.
It's a tricky one too, though, because it's like, you know, that was also at a time when I think a lot of that stuff was still a little quieter. It was still a little bit like kind of under the radar. And now it's like it's a lot louder. And I wonder, you know, like, and a lot of people are wondering, a lot of people are thinking about this exact same thing. Like, is that because there wasn't like a strong enough like pushback against any of this stuff? And now like all this weird like hateful, like fascism and racism and things like that's all on the rise. Like it's everywhere right now. Like it's worse than it's been in a long time. Like is like, do you have to push back against that stuff in a more forceful way than just, hey, just don't mess with us and we won't mess with you kind of thing, you know?
Well, I think, something to consider too is like here, we're pretty lucky. Like there isn't a whole lot of that. I mean, I know it's around, but like we've gone all over the country and there are pockets that like, I'm sure that stuff is like just blatant, like they just don't care, like we had a really bad time in, Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Allentown, Pennsylvania. We literally warn other bands if they're open-minded or they're a little whatever you'd want to call like left-wing, they're liberal, whatever you want to call them in the old sense of the word. We literally warn them, watch out when you go there.
Allentown.
And why is that? Why do you warn them?
Well, in particular, we played with a band that we didn't know at the time until we played after them. They were a straight-up white power band. And their fans were like Sieg Heiling in the pit, and we're just like...
We just got booked on the show, and we didn't even know. We basically it was like a setup almost, not on purpose necessarily.
Things got real tense in there. There's pretty big, huge penitentiary dudes, with swastikas tattooed on their temples, and it was people were kind of...
They had guns.
I was gonna say
they bring
were
guns.
Pulling pieces.
Yeah. To be clear, we could all tell you guys horror stories. They're serious people, though.
But
I mean, they're dangerous.
What did we do? We, played a cover song by a band called Cockspar, which is totally known for being, anti-white supremacist and fascist.
He
and
jumped right
and
in it.
that was our answer to that, I mean, he got punched in the face during the song for it, but...
Yeah, they punched me in the face, and we just kept playing. We didn't give a shit.
Did you guys make it through
the guy spit on me, too. The leader of the gang spit on me, and I just licked it up.
Yeah,
I just licked it up and flipped him off.
Oh man, I'm not going anywhere near you again.
Yeah, that's it. Well, that's the thing. We're a punk rock band, so we can be dirty if we want to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been around. We've slept next to dumpsters and all kinds of gross stuff. On touring, like a lot of people don't realize that they see bands, but touring all over the country, it's a dirty job and it's hard and it's you're sweaty and you're
I'm waiting for that one for the next episode of Mike Rowe's TV show.
And because of the style of music we play. Sometimes you're playing the roughest venue in the roughest part of town that no one else is even going to. So you're getting to see the underbelly of the country.
So you had a choice then when you realized what you're surrounded by to play that show or not play that show.
Yeah.
There would be a lot of people in your position who would say, we refuse to participate in this. We don't want to be here. But you believe as punk rockers that it's better to just get in there, give the middle finger and just do it.
Well, not to sugarcoat it, because it definitely wasn't quite that way. That'd be nice to just say, yeah, we're super tough, blah, blah, blah. We drove how many hours? Like 8 hours or something, like 6 hours. I don't know. Because a lot of people don't realize you're playing a major city. You're playing a major city, and then you're driving 10, 12 hours, 8 hours. You're lucky. You're like, 6 hours, great, short drive. You're driving all the way from Boston to New York. I mean, you're driving long distances, and you're like, what are we getting paid? And how much gas do we have? Yeah. And I'm kind of hungry. You know what I mean? So there's we actually literally had a band meeting. One of the few times we had a band meeting. We don't, usually I just go, you hungry or no? You know what I mean? Like, should we go eat now or after the show? But that we had to sit down and we had to say, we might get killed at this venue. We might get literally, and they're letting all these guys in, and you could see these guys are in like they're not just buddies. They're in some kind of an actual group, a gang, a movement. They're wearing patches or something. And like Johnny was saying, they're walking by our merch and looking at us and just with just ice cold stare. And we're like getting more and more uncomfortable. We're like, this is serious. And it's an area where you can just open carry guns. So these guys are pulling up outside. I'm going and checking out. We check on our van when it's outside. And we're seeing these guys have gun racks on their cars. They're packing heat. And then there was actually a kid from New York that saw us a few nights earlier, just a cool local kid. And he was from Allentown, Pennsylvania. And he told us, he said, hey, he was not supposed to tell us. He even said, don't tell us, which of course I'm telling you guys now. This is a long enough ago now. Yeah, don't tell anybody. Yeah. But he's like, hey, I'm from this town. And he's like, there's going to be like 50 of these guys here. And he's like, that guy over there, he points at a guy. This guy's wearing a sweatshirt in this hot venue, sweating. And he's got both his hands in there. And they're just like sketchy looking. And like Johnny was saying, these guys are like big yoked dudes. Like they're not kids. They're like dudes in their 40s that are lifting weights all day and eating like raw meat. Like these guys are real serious. And they're just like, they've probably been institutionalized in and out, and they're just angry, frustrated dudes. To me, it's like, the punk rock kids are all frustrated and angry too. So we're like, okay, to me, that's like a platform to try to give somebody something like, hey, we get it. We've been there. Like,
some common ground.
Exactly.
Means of connection.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, if the people are going to stand back there and listen, you never know. Maybe they'll change their mind. Maybe they'll open their mind a little bit. But we're basically in their town, on their turf. We're way outnumbered. So we had to literally ask each other, do we go outside and grab rebar from this construction place next to us and fill our merch and our guitar? We actually had to put our guitar cases on the stage and fill them with rebar in case we got attacked by 50 giant Nazi guys in a group, in a militia of some kind, or something. Yeah. And it got weird. It was a power struggle. The guy, like Spite was saying, the guy punched me in the face when we played the Coxbar song, because they probably like the band also, even though the band doesn't support their political beliefs. That's a weird thing that we deal with too. They'll blend in. They might be wearing bands that we even like that don't have those political views because they like the sound of the music. Yeah. And they like, hey, that song's about working. I can relate to that. That song's about this cop harassing me for no reason. I can relate to that. So there's all these, things they can relate to. And then, there's that. So when we played that song, that's when the guy, punched me in the face and we kept playing. The thing we did instead of leaving is we got more energized. And we started playing harder and faster. We got more motivated. We got, we were getting pissed because we were like, we're going to probably maybe get our asses beat or shot or killed. We're going to go down in flames. Let's just make it look cool. Let's just make it look cool. Like, we drove 8 hours, and this is something that happened to us. We wouldn't be booked with those bands on purpose. We would be like, no, that's okay.
Well, it's pretty remarkable what happened at that point, I think, was we did notice the pit, like some of like our fan type kids. Yeah. They got more aggressive. And then there was like an actual power struggle in the pit
showing out
amongst themselves.
Yeah, whatever kids were probably there and people that are not part of that whole mentality, they're probably being oppressed all the time at shows they want to go to. And we kept playing and they could tell we were against that. And then when I flipped the guy off and he spit on me and I licked it up and stuff, he looked at us like, what? These guys are fucking crazy. And we were like, yeah, like fuck, whatever. And then basically they all ended up backing up all the way to the back of the room and we kind of just, energy-wise, do you know what I mean? It was a slow thing. It was kind of and it changed. And then, but that's a dangerous place to go to. So
at least at that
be
time.
Be careful, yeah. Maybe it's fine now, but
what year was that? Ish?
Oh, man. I don't know.
2003.
Long time ago.
It could have been a while ago.
So,
but I have friends that have been out near that area. It's still, there's pockets, like Spite was saying, there's pockets all over the country. You'll go, like when we were in Detroit, right? Mostly, there's super cultural neighborhoods and we're walking around in there getting some food and stuff. And then we'll drive to this edge, this little suburb. And then somehow these guys are tucked in there, and no one's bothering them, but they won't go to the city where we just came from. They just stay in their nice little area.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff's even like, I hate to say it, I mean, that stuff's even here in the Bay too. Like there was that show that we were about to get booked on in San Jose not that long ago. And it turned out that like one of the bands that was playing that was a white power band. Yeah. And that was like, it was like almost the same thing. Like we didn't know of this band. No, we had nothing to do with it. We actually ended up hearing it. Thankfully, we heard about it from like people in that local scene in
accidentally. We ended up having to research the band. Yeah. Just to see you didn't really even used to have to do that very much. Like, should we research this band and see if they're like okay to just play some music with? Yeah, it's crazy.
The way you've been kind of tensing your verbs here, it makes it sound like you've had a number of these confrontations with people. Have they been violent often?
Some of them have even been in the newspaper, like the place we just played recently. The old owner of the Galaxy Theater when it was the Galaxy in L.A. He was letting these guys come in.
It's now the Observatory.
Now it's the Observatory.
Tell us about that.
And the Observatory is great, just to clear that up. It's totally cool. Right. It was great. We played each other. That was just a situation where...
This was in the newspaper, what you're about to talk about?
It ended up in the newspaper. Yeah. And they said we caused a riot. We stayed cool-headed.
Hey, we at the Phoenix know all about that. The newspaper saying he did something he didn't do.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We've been here at a bunch of the Phoenix where there's things like that, and they just show up whenever, and they whatever sounds cool to the newspaper. Yeah. But they tried to push Spite into the bathroom when he was just walking back from the merch or something.
The guy was trying to goad me in there. I had a jacket with a Fight Racism patch on, which was stupid now with hindsight, because that area was Well, because that area is littered with the Nazi lowriders and the P&I Death Squad.
Yeah.
We didn't know that stuff.
And those are gangs that are like on, like FBI lists and stuff. They're not like kid
penitentiary gangs,
Yeah.
So it all stemmed from that. You know, I had to like take off my jacket.
It was crazy. Yeah.
I had to have this little meeting with the lady who was head of that penitentiary crew. And she was by proxy the head because her husband was in prison. He was the actual head of it.
This is at the show this is happening?
Yeah.
This is at the show.
shows while we're
Yeah.
just trying to
Yeah.
play some music and
You know, like we're not trying to
Yeah.
get involved with like, you know, disturbing anyone's scene necessarily or whatever, you know. We're just there to like play music
Yeah.
and like
often we don't know.
You,
I mean, we don't know.
You were on their turf, so this was a problem.
Orange
and
County,
You had to
yeah.
meet with this person to
It's
make
Orange
sure
County.
that what?
yeah,
that
yeah,
you
back,
left, or
backstage because no,
what are
I
you
mean
doing here?
she was there at the show.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually heard her like, you know, before I even saw her, she said like, "Oh, fight racism." Well, racism won. And I'm like, "What the heck?" And I look behind me, and there's like a semicircle of huge dudes holding things behind their back, and I'm just like, "Oh, I'm dead," you know.
And this was recent.
No,
Ish.
yeah, 2005-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I think.
But
that-
those guys are strong. I think a lot of why they come is because, for one, the music has energy, and they're looking for something. You know, all these people. One thing underneath all this thing is they're all looking for something to be part of that's larger than themselves. And then in a lot of cases, like I was frustrated when we were touring all the time. We were touring a lot.
Which was a while ago now. But.
Yeah, I started actually saying even to people when we would get there a lot of times, like in some of those areas where you know there's a lot of that thinking in the crowd, you just know it's out there. You're seeing billboards on the way into town that say like things that you couldn't imagine being on billboards around here, right? And you're just like, you just know it's out there. There's a lot of that thinking. I started telling people, hey, we're resilience. We're from the future, you know, because it would almost seem like, wow, this is so open-minded. They must be from the future or something. Like, I don't even, to be clear and honest, a lot of the stuff that we amongst each other talk about is creative and productive. We like to do stuff, make things, build things. We're mostly just talking about this because to kind of educate people that that's out there. And that's all we've really been doing. We don't even really like to talk about it. It's a negative thing. It just sucks. You know, like these people are out there that are just hating people. You know what I mean? We're being forced into positions to talk about it a lot of times because we're willing to. You know what I mean? We're willing to be like, hey, this happened. We went out here and we saw this, you know? But really, it's like, it's not, you know what I mean? We do voice it and we stand against that clearly in our music. But it's definitely not like, it's just one thing that we, you know, and you are seeing it rise up. And from at least, I don't know, from my point of view, we've always talked about this amongst ourselves. It rises up and people push it back kind of to obscurity, and it rises up and you push it back to obscurity. It rises up, and it's always looked that way to me. Like, well, some random, we call them boneheads. Like they have no brains. That's what we call them. Like if you see a guy who's dressed like a skinhead, we won't even usually call him a skinhead. I won't, you know, because that's a disrespect to people who live that life that aren't racist, that are decent people. And there's a lot of those people. There's skinheads in South Africa. There's skinheads all over Asia. Tons, like that, thousands of skinheads in Mexico City. And they're skinheads and they're Mexican. You know what I mean? So that just clarifies that a skinhead's not a white racist. That's just, it's a lifestyle. Like you could be a rude boy.
I'm glad we finally brought it all the way back around.
Yeah,
to
all
that.
the way around.
Good.
It would also be like really overtly fascist, like more than a lot of times fascist organizations usually are. To like, if everyone knew that they were called sharps and that sharps were skinheads against racial prejudice, it's a lot harder to create like a media narrative against that, because people aren't necessarily like, hopefully people have some inherent good in them to know like, oh, like they're anti-racist. Like, why would I hate that? Why would that be a bad thing? Right? Like that's a lot harder to create a media narrative against or some kind of story against. But skinhead, like that sounds like, for a lot of people, maybe it's a conditioning thing, but like that sounds in your mind like something that would be scary or something that would be bad.
Well,
right?
also if you just directly translate it and you know nothing about that underground culture, it sounds like you could be saying skin-minded. Like you're thinking about skin color. See what I'm saying? And that's why I say it's kind of sad that is the moniker that stuck to them. Like punk rock didn't even need to be called punk rock. You know, like punk was like a hoodlum or something, like a hoodlum kid in the street, like out doing something. And then they just stuck that to it. And a lot of the people that were part of that in the beginning, like the Ramones and Iggy and the Stooges, were like, what? What are you calling me? You know, but now it's like, whatever. Once a newspaper prints it, boom, that's what it is.
Well, and then there's also like the difference between punks and punk rock, right? Like those are two different things too. But anyway,
there's a good quote from Fury from a Bohemian article that was written in 2005 by Gabe Moline on this very topic. And you said this, it's more or less our job to discredit all the stupid stuff that isn't really punk at all. I think a lot of angst and youth frustration gets confused with being punk, but to me, I see punk as an actual worldwide movement that doesn't even realize its own force.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
12,
like
12 years
something you'd
later.
say.
Yeah, no, that's
Yep, I said it.
That's totally accurate. And punk it's global. You're basically it doesn't even need to be called punk. I mean, what the hardcore scene, people who just think for themselves, individuals, we're just more out there about it. Punk rock's like, yeah, that's what I'm about. Like punk rock kind of gets into it, because of the energy and all that,
I appreciate you saying that you don't like to focus on the negative.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very interesting because it gives a sense of urgency to your message.
Yeah.
Not only have you witnessed the hate that a lot of people are just being
we've
introduced to right now,
all in
but
there.
it also, I think it is worth being proud of what you stand for, which is the ideals that you've stated at the beginning of this episode and that go throughout your lyrics.
As far as all the content of what all the songs are about, it's definitely a clear fight against specific things. We try to make it really clear. We try, and even on the new album that we're working on, which we don't know exactly what the name is yet. It's going to be called something to probably similar to Wake Up or Wake the Fuck Up or something like that to get the urgency across. You guys really need to, because we've been on the outside of society, on the edges, marginalized that way. And we kind of accept that. We've been fine with that a long time. You know what I mean? But on a larger scheme, you can see that globally, if people don't wake up at least a certain percentage, even 10% maybe, of what we have seen from a larger skew at politically and socially, that there's going to be, there'll be problems. There'll be consequences,
Well, we're on the edge of that right now.
Yeah. And even you were talking about George Bush when he ran, I remember people thinking that was going to be the end of the world. He was the Antichrist or something, and everything was just shit was going to hit the fan. And then it seemed like it got worse. And then we thought maybe it would get better, and then it was worse. And now it's like a game show. I don't know if it's WWF. It's politics is like a joke.
Has the band's approach to expression or activism changed since you were young, precocious folks forming a punk rock band in 1999, and now it's 2017, 18 years later?
That's an interesting. I've thought about that a lot myself recently because when I joined this band, it was 2002, and that was it was a long time ago. And I'm a lot older now, and I have a lot more to lose now, and I have a lot, and also I'm a parent and things like that, and that's a thing that's happened in the last few years. And so my attitude towards the sort of the legacy of that of what I want to kind of leave behind and that kind of thinking, that's kind of what I think about a lot, what I want to teach my kid, what kinds of things that as she grows up I want her to be aware of, and then I kind of transfer that to what I want other people to be aware of too. For me, just personally, it's probably different for each one of us, but for me personally, when I got into punk rock and stuff, I was gonna say Johnny hasn't said much this whole time. At first, it was something to that was an alternative to a lot of other things, and there's something struck me about it. Specifically, it has this energy that's just different than anything else. I listen to other kinds of music and lots of different things, but something personally for me kind of struck me, and then when I realized there was so much more to it, it's an old memory now. So you know what I mean? It's generalized, but it's when I realized there was all this just depth to it underneath it, and even now I'll even listen to songs that I used to listen to a long time ago and be like, what? I didn't even realize the guy was saying that to me. There's a real personal message in it, that you don't even realize. A lot of the stuff, at least lyrically, that I'm trying to do now, I'm trying to be really clear. Because there's a lot of confusion just in general in the world. And there's a lot of confusion that you can have when you listen to something, fast and energetic. You might be like, what's it? So I've been trying to clarify lyrics, boil them down almost to a strange degree where they're just just the bones of it. This is the message. Say if I think maybe people need to think for themselves more, maybe this song needs to scream, think for yourself. Almost ridiculously so.
Just say it.
In the beginning of one of the songs we played, which was "Wake the Fuck Up," right?
Yeah.
That's right at the forefront. It's right at the forefront of the song.
It screams that. It screams, "Wake the fuck up," because it's you feel sometimes the world it's in a even worse state. Like Tom was saying, it's slowly graduating, almost maybe worse. The potential's great. The potential's there. People have this great potential, to create and make things and all kinds of things and just be a decent person. But it's we slowly see it slipping away. It just weirder and weirder, getting kind of darker, And so it's like, to me, that makes me feel like, oh, these people are not getting this message. This is not coming across. They're confused. Like, they must just think this song's about fun. You know what I mean? And we have fun also being ourselves and expressing ourselves. To me, that's the fun in it. I've always said to myself personally, if one person leaves this show and they feel a little bit different, like I did when I was younger and I saw something, that's it. It's good. And even if they don't, I'm still doing what I believe in. I'm still doing what I want to do with my time as something extra in my life.
Did you used to be more of a punch thrower when you were younger and angry?
No, I've never thrown a first punch.
Okay. So
I never will.
So do you believe that, like,
I'll let somebody punch me,
Yeah.
and we can even talk about it first, and I'll say, okay, go ahead and punch me. I don't want to get punched by somebody. And then maybe I'll defend myself.
But your means of presenting your argument, presenting your beliefs, do you think that those have changed as you've gotten older and wiser? Or do you think that you pretty much...
You mean on like out on the street? Like
I
it's just
mean
the
just
real
you as
world?
an individual, whether it's you on stage or whether it's you on the street. I just wonder if there was a shift.
I just probably sound angrier. I'm like the angry guy, right? But actually, funny thing is I'm not angry. You know what I mean? I just really don't like those negative things. They make me feel angry because it's negativity hitting you. And so you're trying to push it back. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Actually, no, I won't force my ideals down anybody's throat at all. No,
and you
never.
don't feel you ever did when you were younger?
I might, if someone engaged me, I'll even have conversations with people where they'll see a tattoo that I have and they'll say, what's up with that? And I can tell they're trying to bait me. And I'll say, you know what? I don't want to talk to you about it. You won't like it. I don't even want to waste my time with it. You know what I mean? And so I'll actually a lot of times go away for that. Or if I hear two people picking on each other, I might be like, hey, just listen to this guy. So I don't really think that I've been like, I don't feel like I've been somebody who's like, it's just a freedom thing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to like your opinion. We've got into all kinds of situations where we've diffused fights time and time again, diffused knife fights, diffused people from beating the crap out of each other in front of shows and said, hey, like, let's not get this venue shut down. We're trying to come back here next time, right? Here too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we say, hey, if you guys really have a personal problem, you've probably seen any of us do that or go help somebody, and say, hey, take that down the street if you guys have a personal beef. Well, I don't think there's anything that I believe in that I would personally say gives me the right to go punch someone in the mouth. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
I've known him
in general.
for about 2 decades, and I've never seen him like be the oppressor, the attacker.
No.
One universal truth, it seems to me, with like the provocateurs is they want that punch. They want that attention because then once that happens, they've got the power to retaliate and for people to listen to them.
There was a famous psychologist, like way back 1800s, way back when people had a lot more political diversity on the street and they could, I'm a communist, or I'm an anarchist, or I'm a Democrat, and be like, okay, cheers, have a good day, and it was no big deal. You know what I mean? And he said, and I've always disliked this quote. That's why I remember it. I'm not going to quote it perfectly, but he basically says that an anarchist or somebody that believes in true freedom is the first person that in a state of peace, if we all just had a peaceful reality, would be the first person to throw a Molotov cocktail or a punch or something. And I've always hated that. Yeah, because I'm like, man, really? Come on. Because I'm not like that. Yeah. I want freedom. And if we have a bunch of freedom, then we'll just write songs about some other stuff. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It will be like, well, good show, guy. Hey, good job. I guess somebody was listening. And now we can write the song about painting the fence. It'll be great. Do you know what I mean?
Fence needs to be painted.
Fence does need to be painted.
But there's other things ahead of it in the queue that need to get fixed before we paint the fence.
But that is a good thing to bring up, because you do have people that might say that they're into freedom, trying to bait other people to oppress them or something strange. Like, so that's almost a psychological problem at that point. Like maybe in our society where people want to be abused.
Well,
you know what I mean? I'm not sure what's going on with that.
They're abusing the expression.
Is that the old Eurythmics song, right? Some of them want to abuse you.
Everybody wants to be abused. But nowadays you're hearing a lot of the term freedom of religions being used so that you can oppress somebody. But I don't want to do it. I don't want you to be here because my religion says that you can't be here, and I shouldn't have to put up with you then.
Well, how
And
how many people are worried about having their rights taken away? And it's like people who have all the rights in the the world, right? Like
That's the crazy thing is the provocateurs hold a free speech rally.
right, exactly.
And the freedom of religion is used to make it so these people over here can't do things.
Right.
It's this weird sort of inverse way of presenting your argument,
Absolutely is.
which may seem reasonable to someone who's not really paying attention to your argument.
Well, it's a hard thing to argue against, right?
That's-
Like nobody wants to argue against being the free speech person, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody wants to be the person who fought against free speech, right? Like, but at the same time, like, and maybe there totally is some aspect of having free speech that is like you should have the freedom to have your views, even if they're shitty views. You you have the freedom to have those shitty views. The problem because when you use those shitty views to then attack other people, right? Like we all know this, but that in and of it, that then is not free speech. Then you're the oppressor at that point, right? Like, so
The term for that simple term is called a double standard.
yeah.
I want my freedom, but you need to shut up.
Yeah.
What the hell? You know what I mean? Like, come on. That's ridiculous.
On my end of it, it's like they're welcome to say and think whatever they want.
Yeah.
But too often it just becomes like a physical comfort. There is no dialogue. It's just all of a sudden, just bam, bam, bam.
A lot of it's also like I feel like it kind of depends on the context around things too, right? Like I can myself say like, oh, I don't like start, being the one to throw the first punch, or I don't, want to like have, a physical altercation about something or whatever. But I'm also in a position where I can kind of I can say that, right? Like that's like a thing I can kind of turn on or off, and I'm pretty aware of that. Like for a lot of people, like there isn't really the other option, right? Like there is no like, well, let's talk about it for a minute, right? Like for a lot of people, all there is just the physical altercation. And so like that's, like
You're basically talking about people who are just like getting attacked for being the way they are. I can jump straight into the difficult stuff that no one wants to talk about real quick and short. So here's the thing. If we're going to have real freedom, if we're going to have like any kind of real democracy, like in Latin means the people will rule. That means that everybody has a say. So that's actually individualism. If we just want to boil this down super simple, if I want to have freedom and freedom of speech, I have to. This is not really debatable if we're going to have freedom. Then this is where things get real weird. So I'll be the guy who says all this because people are uncomfortable, especially in the time. I can see people don't even want to have these kind of conversations. They're just like, holy shit, like this is about to get serious. You have to be willing to let other people have their say. Just let them have their say. You don't have to like it. I don't like a lot of stuff that a lot of people believe in. Probably 90% of what a lot of people believe in. If I could dig into their heads, maybe I'm wrong. But they might believe in a lot of stuff that I'm like, man, that's all kinds of messed up. But the problem is I would actually fight for their right to say that stuff. I would fight for their right to say that. That's freedom. I don't have to like it. I don't have to go hang out with that guy. So if you go to a rally where somebody's saying some messed up crap that you don't want to hear, like when was the last time you saw me at a KKK rally? I don't go.
Yeah.
Real simple. I don't want to deal with that shit. Those guys are tucked away somewhere, right? If it starts getting closer to my front lawn, see what I'm saying? Then we're going to have a problem because now they're impeding my freedom just to be where I'm at. That's why a lot of those kinds of things are supposed to be out in a big cement area, away from your house, in the middle of a big city, like an old town square, and they have the right to go. And you're like, oh, those guys were talking about that baloney today. Not going to show up. You know what I mean? And you can, if you want to go and hear what you might want to go. Hey, these people are maybe enemies of things that I believe in directly. If you think they're going to it's going to escalate, they're going to hurt you later. Maybe you do want to go see what they're going to say so that you're knowledgeable about these people that are maybe going to attack you at some future point. It's real tricky, but there's really no point before that time when they are saying, we're going to go hurt some people. Where anybody, this is just my opinion, where anybody has the right to tell anybody else, they're not allowed to say anything. That thinking right there is the problem to begin with. Somehow this religion or somehow this group allows me to tell you to shut up. That's crazy. And that's not, I'm not even what you call a patriot.
The real friction is what's going on here is you have the two groups that like, there is that group that's saying that, like, you can't say this, you can't say that.
And can't is already just a huge problem.
I think like kind of on our side, we're like, no, you can say that stuff, but like we're going to have a show of force and show that like,
sure,
we don't like what you're saying, but I'm not necessarily going to bring a fight to you because of it.
Right. And those people have that right to show up too.
Well, it's also not just saying, it's also like, we don't like what you're doing, right? Like that's the real, that's where, you know, it kind of really comes in.
It's that final, there was a bum, it might sound funny, but there was a bum who told me one time, he's like, freedom ends, this is boiling it all the way down to just nothing. But he basically said, freedom ends at the end of my fist and the beginning of your face. That's it. You know, like I can say whatever I want to say. As soon as I hit you and I've taken your rights or your freedom, now you have the right to defend yourself. Do you know what I mean? You can talk all the smack you want all day long. You know what I mean? Whatever. People, and that's the thing. This is another thing. I'm going to say this. Being an outcast, being someone who's purposefully adopted this lifestyle. When we were younger, Johnny can tell you a lot more stories about this even than we can, because he's told me tons of stories about just getting the crap beat out of him for having blue hair and a leather jacket by a bunch of dudes driving down the street in a truck for no reason other than what? Having blue hair, right? Yeah.
Looking weird.
Bad, hospitalized. Like he had to deal with that. So he's a little bit older than me. So his generation made a little bit more room for me to walk down the street with a red mohawk. And I still had to fight people just for looking weird. And so a lot of those groups, any and all of those groups, if you're in a group where you know that people are gonna have opinions. I mean, you're not gonna please all the people with your lifestyle, and you shouldn't try to. You shouldn't even try. That's not even healthy in my personal opinion. You should be an individual. You should be yourself. It's healthy for you. Let's just be honest. Yep. Do you know what I mean? Like, be yourself. I would recommend to anybody, be yourself. I'll stand right back here. Yeah. You be yourself.
Live your best life.
Yeah, no, for real. I mean, that's punk rock's. That's right in there. You know what I mean? Like individualism, individuality, clearly. So the thing is, but let's be also simultaneously. Let's not just be all cloud in the sky. We live in the tangible physical world, right? I'm going to walk out here and some guy might not like one of my tattoos and he might try to punch me. I don't want him to, and he doesn't have the right, in my opinion, to, but that doesn't stop him necessarily from actually doing that. Yeah. So now we're getting into talking about the real world. People can just attack you for the way you look. That's always been the case. That's not new. That's not new at all. That's like some caveman stuff, like before this guy has longer hair than us. Let's just. So what I'm saying, all I'm trying to say is, for any kind of person in any kind of a group where they might be a minority, or I've always said the true minority is somebody who thinks for themselves. But anybody, especially if you look different, I'm aware when I walk places that I look weird. We live in California, so we're, as he's saying, privileged. We're extremely privileged to walk around Sonoma County, California. I mean, I can get all kinds of weird food. Some of the places we've gone in the middle of the country, I've had people look like they want to punch me in the mouth because I didn't get meat on my sandwich. For real. That's real stuff. Like,
look, you can find yourself in trouble with a California license plate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've dealt with that. We've been kicked out of hotels just from being from California. And they're like, "Are you from California or New York?" And they're like, "Oh, these open-minded people. I hate them. I hate them." You know what I mean? And that's why we said we're from the future. But I was just going to say, to clarify, when you're living a certain lifestyle that you know doesn't mesh with the majority, just be aware of it and be realistic. I mean, you know what I mean? You definitely have the right to just go and put any flag you want, 20 feet up in the air. But is it necessarily a good idea? If we lived in that free of a society, that's great. I'm all for it. Sounds good. Let's do that tomorrow. Yeah. But until then, let's also be realistic. Yeah. You know what I mean? Freedom of speech is a good place to start, because you have the freedom of speech. You have that right. Until people can even figure that out. You know what I mean? Like, people need to be safe. They need to be careful. Like, if you're walking around dressed like a peacock and you're walking in a neighborhood that they don't like that, then you should be careful. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily agree that you should be attacked at all. Obviously, that's ridiculous. But you also have to be practical. You have to be realistic. There was so
is part of your argument here that's why it's worthwhile to keep fighting the fight that you're fighting, because we live in a tangible world where these attitudes do exist? I'm just curious what like the zoomed out point you're making here is.
Yeah, it's in the real world, when it just comes down to it. Yeah, it's a fight straight up. I tell a lot of people have asked me before, whoa, what's it like being in a band? That's so fun. It's like a giant party all the time. You getting some free drinks and free food and driving all over the country like you're on a giant vacation. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, first of all, it's not even that kind of music. But secondly, I'm like, from an honest point of view, I feel more like I'm at war with the society, and I'm trying to say something. I'm trying to get people to, we're literally pushing, do you know what I mean? To a large degree. But a lot of those people, it's important if you have people like that in your town or in your family or anything to realize that that kind of reaction of just hating people for something that they didn't make, they didn't build, you know what I mean? The old Carlin stand-up thing. He's like, you're proud of what? You're proud of this? He's like, you didn't make it. You didn't build it. You didn't create it. You didn't do anything to earn it. You're just born this way. And then you're going to be super proud of it. And then simultaneously somehow hate somebody because of however they were just born. It's just ridiculous. You know what I mean? And so when you recognize that it's just coming from this, some kind of weakness, a lot of those people, I look at them and, I don't know what word it is. It's kind of like a pity. You're almost like, man, you're like broken inside. Like, what's wrong with you that you need to point the finger at everybody else? Another bum told me one time, when you have one, like bums will tell you some crazy advice. They're out in it. He told me, be careful when you have one finger pointing out because you have three pointing back. You know what I mean? You've heard that, right?
Yep.
Well, and you mentioned earlier that your new album is very direct because there's a lot of confusion in the world.
Yeah.
And the confusion, as we all know, but I'll say it just for the sake of saying it, confusion helps the people who have the power and have the reins, because the more everybody else is squabbling about why this person feels the way they do and if they're allowed to do this, well, then they continue being in their position of power. So there is sort of a method to all of this.
Right. It's a pitting everybody against.
We have a whole song particularly about that called the Cure or something like that, where I'm not sure what the name is, and it specifically says in there.
We wrote it. I have no idea what the hell the name is.
We change our minds. Yeah, but it specifically says in there, order out of chaos. That's literally that. Order out of chaos. If you just let everything stay a mess, you can sit back and orchestrate. That's where now we're talking about. That's like global economics and world. That song we did tonight too, Bilderberg. Spite wrote that song about the Bilderberg group. Just a lot of people we all know about.
What's
a lot
the
of that
Bilderberg
stuff.
group?
The Bilderberg group. It's for lack of better words.
Probably like when we say like the 1%.
Yeah.
They're like the actual committee, like they have like timetables of like wars that are going to be fought, what the world banks are going to do, how they're going to conglomerate everything. And they have like a plan that they're enacting, and they actually own all the resources, and the propaganda machines and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this notion come from?
Oh, it's not a notion.
Yeah.
They're a real group. It's just
they were
it's a
formed,
documented
I guess,
thing.
in the 40s at the Bilderberg Hotel.
Yeah, in Germany.
And
I think.
it's the most elite like leaders of our world and like the owners of like industry and whatnot. Like I believe the Rothschilds were involved in it.
For lack of better words, it's just like big time movers and shakers getting together in a private meeting and then making decisions. And it technically, politicians aren't allowed to do that legally. They're not allowed to make actual policy behind closed doors, but come on, right? What was that thing they said? If you don't believe that important people get together behind closed doors to make decisions, I have a bridge I can sell you, right?
The Bilderberg Group, Bilderberg Conference, Bilderberg Meetings, or Bilderberg Club is an annual private conference of 120 to 150 people of the European and North American political elite, experts from industry, yada, 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 established in 1954, yada, yada, yada.
There we go, history lesson.
See, there you
Technology.
go.
That's how technology is useful. Just
Actually, I think they met in Luzon last year, actually.
Yeah?
Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you keep track of this stuff.
They're basically like the meeting of the minds. That
They're not hiding themselves. That group is not hiding themselves. They are the industrialists and the movers and shakers of our age.
Yeah.
And
like he was saying, they decide they look at countries where there's like resources and stuff, and they're like the people who plan out how they're going to like influence destabilizing a leader so that they can swoop in and get trade deals on these kinds of resources.
And they buy
just like the
CFR, pay for lobbyists,
trilateral group, Council on Foreign Relations, and on and on and on. Even our own UN's used that way. Well, we're not there, so we don't know what they're doing. That's the problem.
It sounds like very crackpot theory.
Yeah.
Except for these guys are for real.
I used to think a lot of the stuff that's all real in the world we live in was all, conspiracy theory type stuff. And the more you learn, the more you educate yourself on it, the more you realize, wow, You know what I mean?
The
This is
Bilderberg group,
crazy.
These guys think, and they're to a degree, they're right. They're just doing business.
Right.
And
From their point of view.
Yeah, and what's good
They're
for
just doing
business
what
is
they do.
conglomerating.
There you go.
So if it's just about making money and having more luxury for them and their families, then this is how we're going to go about doing it. I don't know how much of it is power or how much of it is just for a want
I kind of
of
feel
more.
like it's like, you know, they
knows?
have the wealth and they have
Yeah.
the resources. They at this point they're just keeping control
Keeping it.
of their power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
The important part, real quick, the main ingredient about that makes it seem a little sinister to all of us working class folk, you know, is we're not invited.
No.
And our media to get an ear in there for us so that we can see what the hell's going on people that run the world, they're not invited.
We've looked at all aspects of society and why people are the way they are and what is acceptable and what is not. You know, just we've really dug into a lot, and there's so much more. What you guys have decided with your time over the last 18 years is to dedicate it to this project and others, but this has been a presence in your life for 18 years. That's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on what this band has meant to you personally, about the role it's had in your life, the people,
Is
the
this
paths?
like a round table?
Whatever. Anybody that wants to share can. If you don't want to share, it's fine. But I mean, basically, we've just talked for a long, long time about personal, and it's been great, and I really appreciate it. Just about the world, about how you view the world, and all that. That's fascinating. That's what this show should be. This show should be people sitting down, expressing that, and then we can see how it manifests itself into the music.
Into music, yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and that to me is an episode done right, and we've
That's
done
cool.
that.
That's cool to know that there's that much more underneath music. A lot of people just hear the top of music and they don't get these people are, you know, people in the real world. And they're doing, you know, they're out there just like anybody else is. We're just like people, just like anybody else.
Well, that's one thing I've, you know, taken away from my experience with the band is that it's really broadened, you know, my view of this nation, you know.
Yeah.
And it's really like given me a lot of just life experiences, which I probably wouldn't have had without it.
Yeah.
You know, there have been like dark times, you know, we've had to, you know, deal with stuff. I mean, we've got way more stories than just what we've told
yeah.
tonight. But we've also had a lot of great things.
And that's, I think, a lot of when we come back, we bring those stories with us. And I think that's probably why we're so into sharing them with people, is because we know they're not really going to get to see that. You have to go out and literally live on $50 a day and drive around and live in a van and almost freeze to death in Chicago and avoid gang fights all over the place and people trying to attack you for having a tattoo or not eating the right kind of sandwich.
Yeah, I think one of the, like the, you know, more so than like the amount of albums or tours or shows we've played or whatever, like one of the most like, I think awesome experiences from my own self personally is like when people, you know, we could play like thousands of people or whatever, and there's like that one person that'll come up and be like, hey, like, you know, in this their own really personal sense of things, and come from this really personal place and be like, hey, like this song or this album or whatever that you guys do or whatever, like this helped me through this period of my life and like made me stronger on the outcome of it, really, right? Like that's an amazing thing to me. Like that if there's nothing else I do awesome with my life or whatever, like that is really freaking cool, and I really love that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's gotten me through sometimes where we've had to deal with such bullshit, you know, like
Right.
we're not getting paid, we're getting beat up, you know, like we're putting ourselves like, you know, in harm's way.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, why
Not
am
spending time with
why
our
am
families,
I doing this?
like-
You know, and it's like, you know, I've really like questioned that too. It's like, okay, I'm providing kind of a space for like kids to get beat up by fucking fascists, you know, and it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I can be a part of that anymore. But then I'll have like some kids to like, thank you, I drove 6 hours to see this, and like we don't have this kind of stuff, and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, that's why I'm still doing it, you know.
You're providing a service back. Like for me, like punk rock gave me a space to grow in. Like it gave me room so that I could figure out who I was and figure out what I was personally about. And so it's like, to me, it's just, we're just, to at least personally, I just feel like I'm trying to give that back to the next generation of people,
definitely.
the next person or somebody. That's all. It's real simple. You're like, oh, this is great. Here, let's share this. You have some. I liked it. You might like it too. You know what I mean?
That's kind of funny because you were talking earlier about like how do you, like, as you're older, like what do you think about as far as like your personal like political views and activism and things like that? Like that idea is also a thing that came to my mind, was like, you know, as we get older and like we kind of like fade kind of out, you know, from the core of the global scene or whatever, if you will, or even the local scene, really. Like the thing I think about is like, what have we contributed back? Like what things have we done to enable like the next like new generation of kids that are in their teens and their early 20s or whatever to like pick up instruments, pick up pens, pick up paintbrushes, whatever it might be, to then propel it forward from where we are. Like if we have done something to make what comes next better than what we did, like that's awesome. And that's like I could call it good from that, really. Like
Yeah.
And watching you guys grow up, because I've been watching punks and players since the 80s. And when I first started doing this, I used to wonder, what in the hell?
Yeah. What are these guys thinking?
What are these kids going to grow up to be? But what it turned out is you guys have grown up to be the people that are building this country still. You're doing exactly the way it always has been.
Right.
We're doing a crappy job.
You're not doing a crappy job.
That's what I was actually
From a larger point of view.
Your corner of the world is going just the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
And you're joined by so many of the kids that you grew up with, doing exactly the same thing and still believing the same thing that they were talking about, dancing about, singing about, and fighting about and pitting about when you guys were kids. You've all held up really nicely, and you really are doing the shit. You are the real world.
Yeah.
You've all grown
It's definitely
up.
a struggle, but the work does pay off. You shape your little piece of reality and try to hold it down. And that's all we were ever trying to do when we were trying to say, hey, there's this Nazi guy downtown. He's trying to recruit kids. Let's tell him to kick rocks. Go down a couple towns, and then maybe hopefully they'll kick you out. And if everybody thought that way, we didn't have to beat the guy up a lot of the times unless we're getting attacked. But we're just like, hey, this place is open-minded. We don't want you around here. That's all real simple. And they don't want to, they're looking for a bunch of negative stuff. And so, that's all that mainly is you're trying to keep your own life, intact, and so you can be yourself.
I was saying this show's going to go on for another.
No, this is good. No,
this is a long show, and there's a lot of
good.
stuff. Also, I just wanted to, one thing about this is this place too, the Phoenix. You know what I mean? This is a place, like the kinds of things we're talking about. This is a place, I remember when I was younger, kids could just come.
Yeah.
Kids could just show up. They didn't need a reason.
There didn't even need to be like
not even a
going
show.
on. Yeah.
Not even a show. They could just hang out, chill, and a lot of stuff. Like when I was younger, especially, people would ask me, "Oh, why are you getting into this?" And what is this? And people would be like, "Oh, I don't understand this music. It's all crazy. It's all rough. It's all angry. It's all da-da." And I'd be like, "Well, I could be doing a drive-by somewhere.
Yeah, right.
I could be doing, I could be ODing down at the creek, or I could go hang out over here and see some rowdy music. You pick. What do you think? Come on. You know what I mean? Like, if it was my kid, I'd much rather have them, oh, I got elbowed in the face at a pit. I got a little fat lip. Big deal, right? I get hurt worse than that skateboarding.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
When I was done, I didn't want to go out and fight after that.
Exactly. And like you were saying, like Tom was saying earlier, you get your energy out.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't even know what that energy is from, what frustration that is.
Yeah.
But you get that off your chest. You get to have fun. You see people you recognize, and you slowly end up being part of a community you might not have even intentionally tried to be part of. When we used to come here when I was 14 half the time, we weren't even supposed to be this far away from home. You know what I mean? You basically got on the bus, whatever, just left. You don't even know who's playing. We'd pay, $5 at the front.
Right. Yeah.
And we would
just like whatever
some
whoever
crazy
was
metal
playing that
band to be
weekend.
playing.
Yeah.
And you that's a service that this place has been providing,
I have
You know what
too
I mean?
many great memories of this place. I
Yeah,
can't
exactly.
even pick one. Like it's just
that's some good stuff.
Yeah.
So it's cool to do this interview here because it has so much, you know what I mean? Like there's so much history in this place.
Yeah, it's like
it's a
crazy.
hub for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. It kind of brings it all back home.
I've been wanting to get these guys on since we've been doing this show, and I'm sorry it took so long.
No, we're here.
But I'm glad we did because this stuff that you played tonight, that you guys, that if you stick around and listen, this was hotter than shit.
It is true that he has been wanting to get Resilience on this show for years.
Yeah.
And
I've been wanting to be on this show for years, so thank you both.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
for doing this.
Thank you
It's-
guys.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's been-
I know, and all these guys doing all this work, it's like you guys have some serious equipment and gear and everything.
Don't you guys have anywhere better to be right now? Or
where else would a person rather be than
Yeah.
listening to this conversation?
We do have the
listening
whole
to this
Phoenix.
12-hour conversation.
We do have the whole Phoenix privately to ourselves right now.
That's true.
This is the
That's
only
a
time we've
first.
ever
That's
been
a
in here
first.
with it empty.
Yeah.
But I just want to say that it's been really great to talk with you guys tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm just really glad that Resilience is still a band. It's 2017 and Resilience is still a band.
And when we put out the new album, we're gonna have to do a record release show here.
Oh,
Let's do it.
Here's where we should would have to do it.
We're in.
But I am glad that you guys are still a band, because there's been so many bands that you guys have played with that are not bands anymore, and it's an accomplishment, and I think it deserves commendation. It requires a lot of energy to keep a project like this alive, and I think that this band is in some ways kind of like a symbol to people who believe what you guys believe, that you should keep fighting, because you can reach people, and look at the adventures it's taken you on.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And in just a moment, the music of Resilience begins. Everyone should stick around for that. And I say, here's to another 18 years of Resilience.
Thank God, I hope not.
Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
We won't sure what it is, you can tell something's wrong. You're not quite sure what it is, you can tell something's wrong. You're not quite sure what it is. Poison, it's in the air, you feel it when you breathe. Poison, it's in the water, you taste it when you drink. Poison, it's in your veins, you feel it flowing through. Poison, it's in your brain, it's in the things you do. This you to the core, you know it, but you still want more. You think that you need it, this you to the core. You know it, but you still want more. You think that you know that. Poison, just look around, it's in society. Poison, been so long, it's in our history. Poison, it's just long and now it's hard to see. Poison, it's cause of our misery. Poison, it's in the water, you feel it when you drink. Poison, it's in the air, you taste it when you breathe. Poison, it's in your veins, you feel it flowing through. Poison, it's in your blood, it's in the thoughts you need. Get out of this poison. You don't know how to break free. Poison. You don't know how to get out of this poison. You don't know how to break free. Break free. You're not quite sure what it is until something's wrong. You're not quite sure what it is. Poison. Look around, it's in society. Poison. Been so long, it's all through history. Poison, it's so long that